H.G.Vrajabihari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalava Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalava Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Ghora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Ghora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna. So, we are reading from the second chapter of the Adi Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's a chapter convincing us that Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, and clarifying that for those who may think that Narayan is such. And then at the very end, we haven't gotten to that yet, at the very end, just in a few verses, we hear about the connection between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Krishna being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So today we are studying, modern technology. Verse 89. Deepa hoite yache bahu, deepera jwalana. Deepa hoite yache bahu, deepera jovana. Mula eka deepa taha kariye ganana. Mula eka deepa taha kariye ganana. Please chant. Deepa hoite yache bahu deepera jwalana. Mula eka deepa taha kariye ganana. Deepa hoite yache bahu deepere jwalana. Mula eka deepa taha kariye ganana. Ladies? Deepa hoite yache bahu deepera jwalana. Mula eka deepa taha kariye ganana. Deepa hoite yache bahu deepera jwalana. So deepa, we know that means lamp, right? Hoite is from, and yache means just as. Bahu, of course, that's a pretty common word we know, right? Means many. Deepera, of many, so this is the plural of lamps. Jwalana, lighting, like lighting the lamps. Mula, right, the original. Eka, we know that. One. Deepa, again, lamp. Taha, that. Kariye, I make. And ganana is consideration. So, translation. When from one candle many others are lit, I consider that one the original. So this is the theme of this chapter, right? Talking about how Krishna is the original lamp and all the other lamps come from him. So Srila Prabhupada's purport. The Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, verse 46, states that the Vishnu Tattva, or the principle of the absolute personality of Godhead, is like a lamp, because the expansions equal their origin in all respects. A burning lamp can light innumerable other lamps, and although they will not be inferior, still the lamp from which the others are lit must be considered the original. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead expands himself in the plenary forms of the Vishnu Tattva, and although they are equally powerful, the original powerful personality of Godhead is considered the source. This analogy also explains the appearance of qualitative incarnations like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, okay, let me get my eyes straight here now. Sambos tu tamo, dvishta natrat, jajal lamaya, sukshma deepa, sika, staniyasya natata samyam. The Sambhu Tattva, or the principle of Lord Shiva, is like a lamp covered with carbon because of his being in charge of the mode of ignorance. The illumination from such a lamp is very minute. Therefore, the power of Lord Shiva cannot compare to that of the Vishnu principle. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'm not used to giving class in front of actual people. I'm so used to being on a computer screen. So forgive me if I'm using my computer. So here, and in this whole chapter, we're being asked to make this distinction between Narayan and Lord Krishna. And then here in this purport, another distinction is being made, Hare Krishna Prabhu, between Vishnu Tattva and then great powerful demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. So distinctions are, we are constantly being asked to make distinctions and to look at different categories. It's part of studying and becoming, studying Vaishnavism. Right? Think of the second verse in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? It says, constantly, completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. So there's a distinction, right? Material activities, spiritual activities. Dharma projita kaita, right? Then it says, the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. So again, making that distinction. And then there's a list that says it uproots the threefold miseries, right? And then another distinction, it says, well, what is that convey? What is it? What is the need of any other scripture? Right? So again, distinctions. So when we think about it, when we're developing our own bhakti and we're sharing Krishna consciousness with others, we're often trying to present it logically and sequentially, and often that means we're looking at the importance of different categories. Okay, so for example, eternally liberated, eternally conditioned, nitya siddha, nitya baddha, right? And then we sometimes even get into more distinctions within that, right? There's the sadhana siddhas. What are the other two? Sadhana siddha, and what are the others? Kripa siddha and nitya siddha. Right, very good. I'm used to asking questions in class because then when you're on Zoom, people have less of a chance of answering their emails during class, right? Because you ask questions, they have to be awake. Right? We have the distinctions of the holy dhams, right? We have Dwarka, Mathura, Vrindavan, and then Rupa Goswami even goes into more detail, right? Than even that. Then there's Govardhan, and then there's Radhakund, right? So many different categorizations are there when we study Krishna consciousness. And then there's so many categories that are super important for our own development of bhakti. Think of Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama, right? And that's explained both in the 6th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, right? The Kanishta has very little faith and little knowledge. The Madhyama has faith but not so much knowledge. The Uttama has faith and knowledge and can explain it to others. And then the 11th canto, another description of Uttama, Madhyama, and Kanishta, right? So these are really important for us to understand as devotees. Now think of Sambandha. What are the other two? Abhideya and Prayojana, right? Isn't that really important for us to understand Sambandha, who we are, our relationship with the material world, our relationship with God, God's relationship with the material world, and there's so many details in Sambandha, even all the way up to very elevated topics of Sambandha. And then the process of bhakti, Abhideya, right? And then the goal of the whole thing, And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu even says that all the Vedas just include these 3 points. So how important it is to understand these categories. Can you think of any other categories that we study? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but different lists that we have? Goodness, passion, and ignorance. Very good, right? And that's really important for our development of Krishna consciousness, right? We're meant to cultivate goodness and be really careful and recognize when passion is ignorance are entering our consciousness. How about namaparad, right? And then namabhas, and then shuddhanam. Super important, right? To know the distinctions of that, and where at any given time when we're chanting our japa, where is our japa at, right? What about Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Karma Mishra Bhakti, Sudha Bhakti, pure devotional service, Uttama Bhakti, right? Very important distinctions to be made. And as we're learning in this verse, the difference between demigods and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How many people in India don't know that distinction? 5, 10? No, it's like crores.
800
Yeah, so many people don't know for us, it's like the easiest thing, at least once we study Prabhupada's books. Of course, for Westerners, it's even easier because we didn't know what a demigod was. Right? We thought a demigod was the latest rock and roll star or something like that, But for us now sitting here, it's not a problem at all. We know the difference between Ganesh and Krishna, but so many people don't. Such an important distinction. In preaching, we learn the distinction between the innocent and the envious, right? They say that the devotee makes 4 distinctions, right? Worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, makes friends with the devotees, gives mercy to the innocent, and avoids the envious. So those, very important. We're taught again and again the importance of making distinctions. And then think of all the different lists that we study in devotional service. Right? Let's see. Let me see. There's 4 kinds of pious people, right? What is that? Chatur vidha bhajante mam jana sukriti norjuna arto jigyasa artarti gani. Right? So that even when we look at ourselves, we say, which category was I in when I took to Krishna consciousness? Right? Was I inquisitive? Was I in search of the absolute truth? Was I distressed? Was I in need of money? Right? So it even helps for self-reflection. And when we're out preaching Krishna consciousness, it helps to kind of understand where people are coming from. And then there's 4 people who never take to devotional or have a lot of struggle taking to devotional service. Right in that same, I think it's the verse before. Does anyone know those 4 categories? Yes. And what? Yeah. Atheists. Yeah. Okay. You're giving me all the English. Good. Yeah. Maya Pratigyana. Yes. Naradamas. Yeah. Right. So those 4, and then we study in the beginning of the Nectar of Devotion the 6 characteristics of devotional service, and even those have categories, right? 2 in sadhana, 4 in bhava, and 6 in prema, right? So again, you'd think that to become a devotee you almost need a calculator, because there's all these different countings, all these different numbers that we do. 6 loving exchanges, right? Giving prasad, taking prasad, giving gifts, and probably maybe the most important one, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially. So these 6, really important for our devotional service. And then while we're at it in the Nectar of Instruction, the 6 things that spoil bhakti. Anyone know those? Atyahara prayasascha. Prajalpa, that's a big one. Niyamagraha. Janasangas, Chaloliam Cha. Right? These are so important, right, to speak Prajalpa, especially in the Holy Dham. Speak Prajalpa. Niyamagraha and Niyamagraha. This is you see this in every religion, and Rupa Goswami has explained it so nicely. Right? Niyamagraha, you're following all the rules, but not to like make devotional service, but you're just, you're getting up, you're putting on nice tilak, and then you think, oh, right? But not with the purpose of it. Or you just think, that's for neophytes, I don't need that. And you see, it's so interesting. If you study all different faiths in the world, they have the same issue with Niyamagraha and Niyamagraha. So Rupa Goswami, he's been very good at giving us so many different distinctions. Then there's these 6 things that are favorable to bhakti. The next word, anyone know that? Utsahan? Nishayadhaya. You're doing good? Very good. Okay, so right to the patience, enthusiasm, confidence, right? Following the footsteps of the previous acharyas, associating with good devotees, etc. These are so important for us, right? And we have that list. What about the 9 processes of bhakti? Right? That we were just studying those in the 9th canto. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, right? The 9 that's okay. Again, the Nectar of Devotion, the 64 items of bhakti. Right? And the Prabhupada covers those in a number of chapters. Right? It's so important. And then, of those, there's Panchanga Bhakti. There's the 5 most potent. They're so important that they're included in the first 59, and then they're repeated in the next 5 to make 64. So in one sense, they're repeated twice. And one of them, all of us are doing just by sitting here. Residing in the Holy Dham. And then, although it's not so pure because it's coming from me, but listening to the Bhagavatam or hear the Chaitanya Charitamrita, chanting the holy names, and then deity worship. And then this is actually considered also, in one sense, Vaishnava, associating with devotees. It's not just, sitting down, taking prasadam and talking about the latest politics, but it's actually talking about the Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. So, again, such important lists. And then, Prabhupada, I'll give you a hint. He had these recited at every initiation. What list is that? 10 offenses against the holy name, right? And interesting, by the way, if you listen to the early initiations, Prabhupada included in the first, what is the first offense? To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives. So he would include people of other religions. Specifically, he would do that in his lectures, in his initiations in the beginning. So the 10 offenses, they're so important. Right? And then we study Harinam Chintamani, and we see that there's one offense that kind of brings about the other 9, right? Inattentiveness. Right? And then we hear that, it's categories into what jadya, laziness. I forget the others. Pramada is one. Pramada means actually you have to be crazy to be inattentive, in one sense, right? To maintain material attachments. It's interesting, it doesn't say to have material attachments. That's like, what else is new? But to maintain them. In other words, we know we shouldn't have them, but we offer puja to them every day, right? So to maintain them is the offense. So these are all so important for our practice. We probably think about them almost on a daily basis. How important the different categories and the different lists that Prabhupada and the previous acharyas and Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna himself have given us in making advancement. Then there's the 5 primary rasas, right? There's also Sthayi Bhav and Vyabhichari Bhav and Sattvika Bhav, right? And then there's the 7 secondary rasas, again, we study all this in our devotional service. So these categorizations are so important. Then there's categories that or categorizations that are not good for bhakti, that are pratikul, they're unfavorable. Prahlad Maharaj talks about making the distinction between friends and enemies. That's not good for our bhakti, right? I'll read one. Prahlad Maharaj replied, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose external energy has created the distinctions of my friend and my enemy by diluting the intelligence of men. Indeed, I am now actually experiencing this, although I have previously heard of it from authoritative sources." So this idea of friends and enemy, it's a big topic in that 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, right? Making this distinction. And he says, I only heard about it before, but then I think especially when he went to Gurukula, he really saw it, how all the training was about friends and enemies. Right? And then this distinction that's also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita about this is good and this is bad in the material world. And I know I'm not great at pronouncing Bengali, but I'll do my best. Dvaite Badra Gyan Shaba Manodharma. E Bhala, E Manda, E Shaba Brahma. In the material world, conceptions of good and bad are all mental speculations. Therefore, saying this is good and this is bad is all a mistake. So that's something those are distinctions that we shouldn't make in the material world. This is good, this is bad. And we'll get into that a little bit later about how a devotee spiritualizes that. But that's a distinction in the Shastra that is not good. And here's another one, especially for us when we're preaching Krishna consciousness. Okay, this one. Not considering a good or bad candidate. I'm sorry. In distributing love of God, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and associates did not consider who was a fit candidate and who was not, nor where such distribution should or should not take place. They make no conditions. I lived in the Gurukul building for so many years. I'm used to thinking that if it was 9, there's going to be 9 of them. They make no conditions. Wherever they got the opportunity, the members of the Panchatattva distributed love of God. And for anyone who's been on some kirtan distributing books, I think we've all had that experience. For many years, I distributed books in airports in America. And if I try to think, oh, this person looks like a tough businessman, he's not going to take a book. This person, is in the army, he'll take a book. And Krishna regularly dispelled those distinctions. The toughest looking person said, oh, Bhagavad Gita, I was looking for that. and the so-called sweetest looking person, get a job, get lost. So I remember we really tried to apply this in our book distribution, to not think good or bad and just approach everyone. And Krishna would work wonders, right, Prabhu? You've had that experience, I'm sure. Yeah. And then, since we're talking so much about nectar of instruction, here's Prabhupada in this purport was so strong. This is the 6th verse of the nectar of instruction, right? Where, actually I didn't quote the verse here, but but in the purports Prabhupada writes, even though a pure devotee may not be born in a Brahmana or Goswami family, if he is engaged in the service of the Lord, he should not be neglected. If we consider the bodily defects of a Vaishnava, we should understand that we are committing an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava. So this Vaishnava looks very nice, this Vaishnava doesn't look so nice. Right? Those who think that Krishna consciousness is limited to a certain section of people, a certain section of devotees, or a certain tract of land are generally prone to see the external features of the devotee. So if you look at that purport today, you'll see Prabhupada preaching so strongly and actually being upset with some of his godbrothers who didn't appreciate that he was making devotees from all different sectors of life, of the world. It was a very important point for him. It's very strong purport. So there's these distinctions that we don't want to make in this world. And people in the world, they make so many distinctions and classify things based on their imperfect senses and basically based on the bodily concept of life. Right? Right? They make so many assumptions about other people. We have so many different biases. Right? Have you ever run into a person who's from your own town and you immediately kind of like them? Right? Oh, you're also from New York. Wow. Even though Shastra says, Boma Ijadi, we think that our place of worship, right? But we make distinctions. Oh, that person's from, I won't mention, but that state in India. Oh, must be a chore. Must be a thief. Right? Oh, they're from that? No, that's very nice. They're from such and such state. Right? Or what to speak of Varnashrama, if we make distinctions based on birth. Right? And of course, Prabhupada would talk about nationalism, right? My country is very important, your country is not. We even have, I call it sports teamism. Right? I like my sport team and your sport teams, right? Religionism, this religion, that religion. So the mind is constantly making categorizations. Right? In this world, it's sankalpa, vikalpa, accepting and rejecting, basically based on janasya mohoya mahamameti, on our own, bodily concept of life. But categorizations are not going to go away. That's an important point here, right? Because we heard about all the good categorizations and the not so good categorizations. So they're not going to go away. They can't be fully given up. The mind does sankalpa vikalpa. It does accepting and rejecting. So the secret in bhakti, in making advancement, is to make sure we're following the right categorizations, those first ones that we talked about. And we're not following the categorizations that are influenced by Maya, by the bodily concept of life. So we have to spiritualize our distinction making. And what's so important about this, if we can do it in the right way, we automatically go back to Godhead. And I can only say that because that's what the Bhagavatam says. So let's talk about not making the right kind of distinctions in a big way. Okay, so this verse, Prabhupada said, should be the guide of all devotees. Does anyone know how many verses Prabhupada said should be the guide for all devotees? There's only one that I know. You know another one? There's only one that he used those words. He used other words. One time a scholar asked him, what is the most important verse in the Bhagavatam? And I can't remember the Sanskrit. I know it. Dharmasya hi apavarga, yeah, he quoted. Right? That religion should be meant for spiritualization, not for sense gratification. Yeah. But this verse in the 10th chapter, verse 14, chapter 14, verse 8, 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse 8, he said in the Nectar of Devotion should be the guide of all devotees. And I know most of you know this verse. Tate nukampam sukshamikshamano punjana evatma hikritam vipakam hridbhagva purbir vididham namaste jiveta yomukti pade sadayabak. So why is this in verse 3? And what does it have to do with the class today about making distinctions? Okay? But Prabhupada writes, the purport of this verse is that when a devotee is in a calamitous condition, so a very difficult condition, so normally our mind will categorize that bad, right? In our day-to-day consciousness, our material, that's bad. That's the category we put that in, vikalpa, right? But then he says, if a devotee is put in a calamitous condition, he takes it as a benediction. Oh my God, I'm supposed to change my categorization. I'm supposed to say, no, it's not bad, it's good. It's not just good, it's supremely good. right? He takes it as a benediction. It's a blessing of the Supreme Lord, and takes responsibility himself for his past misdeeds. In such a condition, he offers still more devotional service and is not disturbed. So that means, again, our mind would normally be disturbed in a difficult situation, and here we're told, recategorize that, don't be disturbed. Benediction, not calamity. Okay? And one who lives in such a disposition of mind, if we can change this distinction, we become the most eligible candidate for promotion to the spiritual world. So just changing this one distinction, Jiveta yo mukti pade sadayava. We go back to Godhead. Now this is not easy. I'm sure we've all had experience that it's not easy. We have some difficulty in our life, and do we immediately take it as Krishna's blessing? We pay obeisances with our heart, with our mind, with our words. But just making this one distinction guarantees us the spiritual world. Isn't that amazing? And then we can also make little distinctions in our day. I'll give you an example in my own life. I don't like low-key sabji. I just don't like low-key sabji. I just never found it to be nice. I just had no taste, and then I just didn't like it absorbs all the turmeric. I didn't like it, right? So that's in one sense that's a material distinction. But someone gave me a bunch of low-key sabji the other day, and I had to change my distinction. He said, "This is Mahaprasad," so I had to say, "No, this is Mahaprasadam. I have to accept this and relish it." Right? In, what is that? Premi Dako Chaitanya Nitai, in love, right? And I had to, and actually when I concentrated my mind in that way, that low-key sabji turned into burfi. In the sense that, it might not have been the most, but because I adjusted my consciousness, I put it in a different category. I don't like the mercy of the Lord, Mahaprasadam. So we can do these distinctions in small ways and catch ourselves when our mind is getting into a little material consciousness and think of all the different distinctions and categories that Prabhupada has given us and adjust our consciousness. So if we can do that in small ways and in big ways, we can become great devotees in that way, and we will, as this verse we just said, we will go back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. So, questions, comments, thoughts, distinctions, more lists? Yes, Mataji has her hand up in the back there. This is the lazy way to do it, handing it. But it's good. It's good like that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Just the last words that you spoke. Could you take an example of those big distinctions that we should make?
Well, the big distinction is,
Yes.
you go to the doctor and you think, this happened to me about 11 years ago. I went to Bhaktivedanta Hospital for a examination. They do this, full body examination. So I went for that, and I was doing really well. I was flying colors, right? But then I went to the cardiologist, and he put his stethoscope here, and I looked at his face. And he called another doctor, and he put his stethoscope there, and he said, "Oh." Then he said, "You have to go to such and such, how you have escorts." This was in Mumbai, and so I needed heart surgery. So that's a big thing, bigger than Loki Sabji, right? And so how am I going to see that as a benediction, or am I going to think, oh my God, I was in those days, I was in my 50s. Oh, I have so much more service to do. Oh, Krishna, right? So bigger things happen. My wife was walking on the street in Washington, D.C. the other day, and she slipped and she cracked her kneecap. And, did she immediately think, Jiveta Yomukti Padesava, or, oh, Krishna, why are you doing this to me? So we have bigger things, health-related, things that really disturb our mind, like that. And those are bigger opportunities. So, but bigger or smaller, whatever, Krishna may send us, he doesn't send us tests that we can't pass. So whatever test comes, so for us, the Loki Sabji level may be a big one. Right? And for more advanced devotees, the bigger things in life may be big ones. And I was just thinking yesterday, I was here, I don't know, maybe a month before His Holiness Kadamba Kanana Maharaj left this world. And we were old friends. We used to help manage this temple, actually, in the 90s. And so I said, Maharaj, are you scared? Are you fearful? And he said, we're good friends. Braj, I am not fearful. I put in my request already. I want to be in Lord Chaitanya's Leela and in Krishna's Leela. I put in my request. He said, I'm a little concerned about the pain because, the kind of cancer he had was very painful, but no fear. And I was thinking to myself, oh, Krishna, if I could have a fraction of Maharaj's consciousness, in that case, I would be so fortunate. So, is that all right? Yeah, Hare Krishna.
So wonderful with all the lists you gave us. I can remember
I'm sure
them
there
all.
are more, a lot more.
Yeah, no, but that's enough for now, I think. But I do have experience with it, talking about this verse with the times when things were the most difficult. When I was in South Africa in 72, and 5 thieves came in. One had a crowbar, and the other 4 had guns. And the guy put the gun at my head and said, get under the bed. And the guy with the crowbar said, shoot him. So I got 2 really good rounds done. I said, Krishna, this is it, isn't it?
Right.
And it wasn't the kind of situation you'd want, but it really made me depend on Krishna.
Yes.
And then, of course, when Rishi Kumar Swami left me alone, and I was there all alone, I wrote to Prabhupada, and of course, when Prabhupada wrote a letter back that began with, I'm very much pleased at the responsibility you have taken to spread Krishna consciousness in South Africa at such a young age. And the third one was when I had a child that passed away. And that's a difficult thing, but it makes you take shelter of Krishna because there's nothing you can do about it. If you lose a job or a wife, you can get another one. Or if some car goes bad, you can get another one. But when that happens, it's so final, and you have to depend on Krishna. And I'm not praying for more of those, but when the things happen, then I know that it, just like sometimes here, it seems like the devotional line is so open, but to get some of the material things done is so difficult. And I'm glad it's not the other way around. I would much rather that the devotional things come easy and the artiques happen on time, class happens when they say it is, and the other things you go, well, it didn't quite work out, or hooking up the phone. And so I'm grateful that it's not the other way around.
Everything happens easily in this temple because Dharmatma Prabhu's here.
No, but we have to appreciate that because, if it was the other way around.
It's often the things that are beyond our control. Like my bad heart is beyond my control. Your child dying is beyond your control.
Yes.
The person putting your gun to your head. So a lot of things that we, making that distinction between what's within our control, and that is usually how we react to what happens. It's usually not so much in our control what happens to us. It's how we react to what's happened. There's a stimulus, there's something that happens, and there's a response. And what we're told to do is between those two, put a gap and consider what should be the Krishna conscious response.
Right. A pause, right?
Yeah.
That's good.
Other thoughts? Oh. Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So as lastly you said, going back home, back to Godhead. So this, we should think that we have to go back home, back to Godhead, or we should have some doubts in ourselves, whether we will go or no.
we don't have much faith in ourselves, but we have unlimited faith in the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, in the mercy of our Parampara, in the mercy of Lord Nityananda, in the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, in the power of Lord Balaram, in the power of the dust of Sri Vrindavan Dham. So that's a very interesting combination, that we may think ourselves not qualified, but at the same time, we've connected, so we've plugged into the most powerful. You know, like Srila Prabhupada said, just grab a hold of my dhoti and I'll drag you back to Godhead. Right? And he made sometimes things so simple for us. Follow the 4 regulated principles, chant Hare Krishna, avoid Vaishnava Aparad, you know, the list that we talked about. So a devotee is, so I think the way we think is we're so grateful, we're so fortunate, and although on our own strength, it's not going to happen, right? Like, you know, those 2 fingers in the Damodar Leela, right? Our determination and Krishna's mercy. But of the 2, Krishna's mercy is much stronger than our determination. And so somehow or other, it can happen just by mercy. And we've seen this, especially, you know, here in Vrindavan, we've seen it so many times. I can remember when Buddhimanta Prabhu, a big book distributor, passed away here. This is a long time ago. 30 years ago, maybe? And he, you know, for just like 5 days before he was leaving, he was not in such good conscience. He was still angry. He threw the Krishna book at B.B. Govinda Maharaj. And then like 2 days later, he surrendered. And he got in really good consciousness. Lohi Taksha Prabhu, he was coming here and it was actually impossible for him to get on a flight. He was so sick. And somehow or other, the devotee who was with him convinced the airlines to let him come. And then he was in such sweet consciousness. And you know, when you leave in Vrindavan in that kind of consciousness, Archa Vigraha Mataji, we saw so many, Suchirani Mataji, we saw so many devotees in such good consciousness when they left. And you know, if you're thinking of Krishna and you're in the holy Dham, it's like, you know, it's a direct flight, no layovers, you know, like that. So it's possible. We've seen, again, and that's what's so nice now. And not that it's nice that we've seen devotees leave this world, but we've seen so many success stories. So it's possible. Is that all right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, one more.
Yes, Prabhu.
The distinction between those who are blaspheming the devotees or
Those who are what, the devotees?
the blaspheming the
Blaspheming
devotees,
the
first offense.
Yeah.
So when they are blaspheming the devotees, if devotee want to correct them, and if they don't want to be corrected and still keep on blaspheming, so what should be done?
You get on your scooter and you leave. you leave the place. Yeah. And maybe you can pray to Krishna for that person that they, you know. I mean, I know people who, when they first saw the Harinam party, they took rotten tomatoes and threw it, and then they became devotees. Maybe you've seen things like that. So but we don't want to, it's the biggest mistake in our devotional life, sadhu ninda. Paramam aparada. It's like parama is usually used in a positive sense, like most wonderful, but in this sense, it's the greatest aparad. Right? Because you just think Krishna loves somebody, and you speak ill of that person that Krishna loves. What's Krishna's reaction? Right? So we should be so careful about sadhu ninda. It's the one thing that we just avoid, like, well, I was going to say like the plague, but like we avoid it like COVID-19. Right? We don't want to hear it. Is that all right? Yeah, put the mask over our ears, not our mouth. Yeah, very good. Very good. In the back, Mataji in the back. When does this go? Till like 11 o'clock? No, what? 9 o'clock.
Thank you so much for your class.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
So I wanted to know when you said that
Hold
this,
the mic like a little.
Vishnu is like a candle.
Yes, I didn't say it. Brahma Samhita said.
Yes,
Yeah.
in the Brahma Samhita, that the flame is going from one to another.
Yes.
And you said also that when we do Sankirtan, we become equanime, we don't see friends or enemies, but we give just the message. And I wanted to know, after you said that those who not practice distinguish friend and enemies, how they think that we are a friend to them, or how they think that we are an enemy?
I think I understand the question.
So simply, because I will make examples.
It's an interesting.
What is a friend? What is an enemy?
It's an interesting point because remember I made those four things that we worship the Lord and we make friends with the devotees, right? So we also make distinctions in one sense, because then we give mercy to the innocent and we avoid the envious. So we do make some distinctions in that sense. We especially, we don't reveal our heart and our inner desires to people who are not devotees, right? We don't, what is it, cast pearls amongst swans. So we do make some distinctions like that. But I'm trying to think more clearly about what Prahlad Maharaj meant like that. And we know, of course, we know everyone is a spirit soul, right? Mamaivangso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana, and ultimately they're servants of Krishna, jivera swarupahaya, Krishnera nityadas. But the non-stop categorizations of people based on what I like and what I don't like is what happens to the non-devotee. It happens all. It's not only Loki Sabji. It's a constant thing of accepting and rejecting. That person's pretty. I like looking at them. That person's ugly. I don't like looking at them. That person sings nicely. That person's of this political party. That person's of that political party. It's become, especially in America and maybe here to some extent, you judge a person by who they voted for in the last election. That's the way you judge them, whether you like them or not. Right? So that kind of constantly thinking, not in a spiritual way. So again, we may take this friends and enemies, which Prahlad Maharaj spoke so strongly against, and again apply it to bhakti. And we want to make friends with devotees. And even then, we make some distinction. Right? We talked about Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur even says, someone says, well, a Kanishta, they're practically not so much devotees yet. I forget the word he used. But he says that you have to categorize them as devotees because asat sangatyag e vaishnavachar. If you don't categorize, then you won't associate with them and give them any blessings. So we also make distinctions between equals, between superiors, between juniors. Right? So we also, but we don't categorize them based on what we like and what we don't like. Right? Oh, I'm not going to, listen to his kirtan because, he sings off key, but I'll go to that person's key because he sings very melodiously. We don't make those kind of distinctions. But Prahlad Maharaj is talking about the, especially the Rajniti that he was studying in Gurukul, right? All about, material distinctions. So that's my understanding of those two. We have 5 minutes. Any last questions or comments, Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So it looks like that there are a lot of things that can help us become more and more Krishna conscious, but we have Kali Yuga brain. So
we have what?
Kali Yuga brain.
Kali Yuga brain.
So we tend to forget things. So is there any one thing that you can tell?
One thing?
that can help us.
How about Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nascheva? Because you use the word Kali Yuga. So, you know, in Kali Yuga, Nascheva, 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 Nascheva. Yeah, if we could just remember to chant Hare Krishna purely. Yeah, we can remember to reread the list. But you know, things like this, lists are usually pretty. They're not so hard to memorize and remember. You know, and sometimes you can, you know, it helps when they're kind of like 6 of this and 4 of that, and you know, how many? You know, there's another one, the Panchatattva, 5 of them. Right? But if we could just remember to chant Hare Krishna, and you know, Prabhupada once said to chant, to hear yourself chant sincerely, right? Or the genuine cry of a child for its mother. So if we're not studious by nature, no problem. We can chant Hare Krishna. And when you think about it, on our deathbed, we're not going to be thinking, 10 of that, and 9 of this, and 5 of that, and 64 of that. We're going to just be thinking, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare, right? Is that all right? Okay. I always know that the best thing in class is to end a little early. Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhuveva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo.